I'm Donna Coriel. I'm a board certified internist and the creator of SoMeDocs. And I'm super excited to welcome Nir Eyal to the interview. So, hi.
Hi, thanks for
And
having me.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, except I'm going to just hold up the book that Nir, can I call you Nir, by the way? Do you mind?
Please,
Okay,
yes, of
awesome.
course.
Some people are formal, Mr. Ayal. Nir wrote an amazing book called Indistractable, which even before I hopped on, I had read and I loved it. So I actually am super excited to talk to Nir. And Nir, can you tell us a little bit, just give us a little background?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm what you call a behavioral designer. So I help companies build the kind of products and services that build healthy habits in people's lives. So my first book came out of a class that I taught for many years at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, which was all about how to build habit forming products. So I've worked with companies in all sorts of industries, including healthcare with patient adherence, right? Trying to help people take the medicine they need or use the device that they're supposed to use, but for some reason aren't using. So I've worked with many companies in the healthcare space. I've worked with companies like Fitbod is a fitness app that gets people hooked onto the habit of exercise. I've worked with Kahoot, the world's largest educational software, to get kids into the habit of online learning. I've worked with the New York Times to get people hooked to the New York Times app. So I've worked with all kinds of companies to help change behavior to build healthy habits in people's lives. And then about 5 years ago, I decided to look at the other side of the equation, that sometimes products are designed to be so engaging that sometimes they become distracting. And that's exactly what I found happening in my own life. I was patient zero here for this problem. I found that I was getting distracted by many of these devices. I remember one particular instance where I was with my daughter one afternoon and we had this perfect daddy daughter day planned where we could just have fun together, and we had this book of activities, and one of the questions in the book was to ask each other, if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want? And I remember the question verbatim, but I can't tell you what my daughter said, because in
Wow.
that moment I was checking my phone, looking at
Right.
I don't know what,
Right.
and my daughter got the message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And by the time I looked out for my device, she had left the room, and I knew that I'd blown it. And so that's when that was the moment 5 years ago that I decided for my own life, I had to figure out my relationship with distraction, not just with phones, not just with my daughter, but I wanted to understand, why was it that I would say I would do one thing and I would do something else? I would say I would exercise, I didn't. I would say I would eat right, I wouldn't. I would say I was going to do my work, I was going to stop procrastinating and focus, and I would still get distracted by one thing or another. And so that's when I decided, hey, you know what? If I could have any superpower, I would want the power to simply do whatever it is I said I was going to do, to live with personal integrity. And so that's why I decided I wanted to uncover the psychology of how to become indistractable.
Wow, that so resonates with me. I have so many questions to ask you about that. First of all, it almost sounds like a scene from a movie, right?
Mm.
Like where the parent is so distracted and the child is constantly sort of tugging at their pants or whatever to get their attention. I love that you had such self-awareness that you were able to
Mm.
just stop and recognize that. And I think that that's the double-edged sword nature of the online world and social media these days is that there's pluses and there's minuses.
Yeah, and I didn't want to write another one of these books that basically tells you technology is evil, technology is melting your brain, because it's just not true. That if you look at the technology itself is not the problem, and I know from personal experience, I tried to get rid of the technology. I did what these books tell you to do, and
Okay.
I still kept getting distracted. Right? I'd
Right,
say,
right.
oh, there's that interesting book on the shelf, or let me just clean up my desk, or let me take out the trash, let me do whatever it is to not have to do the thing I know I should do. And
Wow.
procrastination and distraction has been around a very, very long time. 2,500 years before the iPhone, Plato complained about how distracting the world was, about how he called it in the Greek akrasia, the tendency that we all have to do things against our better interest. It's part of the human condition. It's not something that the iPhone or Facebook created. It's been around for a very, very long time. And the fact that it's been around for so long prompted me to not look for simple, easy solutions, because that's what people love to blame. They love to scapegoat the latest technology,
Totally.
as every generation has, right?
Yeah.
In our kids' generation, it's social media. For our generation, it was video games or rap music or the television, or before that it was radio. I mean, all the way back to the written word. Socrates bemoaned this new technology of the written word that was supposed to enfeeble men's minds. So this is nothing new, this freaking out about technology. And guess what? Technology is never the problem. Now, it is part of a tool set that we can use to escape our present reality. And that's actually turns out to be the root cause of all distraction and procrastination, is this desire to escape uncomfortable emotions.
Right.
And so whether it's, too much news, too much booze, too much football, too much Facebook, you'll find something to get out of your head if your head isn't a very pleasant place to be. And so we have to start there. And that's why I wanted to dive into the deeper reason to understand not just what are people doing. Of course, people are distracting themselves with these technologies, but why? What are they looking for? What's going on inside of us that makes us not able to have dinner with our family, or to read a book, or to just be by ourselves for 5 minutes without constantly looking for something to take our minds off of reality?
Love it. Do you think, you mentioned that it's always been in existence, and you're right, but my question is, do you think that it's more intense now in terms of the ability to distract us?
Well, I think if you are looking for distraction you will find. It's
Got it.
become easier than ever to find distraction because we're all carrying around these technologies in
Exactly.
our pocket.
Right.
If you're looking for it, you'll find it. But it's not a new phenomenon. It's been around for a very, very, very long time. And I think that, the interesting thing is that the solution to distraction many times comes from our technology as well. That I talk about in the book, how we can actually use technology for the
Right.
first time to help block out all sorts of bad distractions in our lives. So, the technology, here's the thing. We're not going to turn back the hands of time. That most people tend to fall into two buckets when it comes to distraction. We have what we call the blamers, and we have what we call the shamers. The blamers, they blame stuff outside themselves. It's Facebook, it's the phone, it's, I hear this all the time. It's the modern world these days, right? So people tend to blame things outside themselves. Then what we have is the shamers. The shamers, they don't blame things outside themselves, they shame themselves. Oh, you see, I have such a short attention span, or there I go again, getting distracted, or I'm lazy, I'm this, I'm that. They shame themselves. And ironically enough, we know that the more we shame ourselves, the worse we feel, and the more likely we are to seek escape with, guess what? More distraction.
Wow.
And so the solution isn't to be a blamer, it's not to be a shamer, it's to be what we call a claimer. A claimer
Mm.
claims responsibility not for how they feel. This is a very important point. You cannot control your feelings. Okay, you can't control your urges
Hmm.
any more than you can control the urge to sneeze. You don't control your feelings. What you can control is your response, hence the word responsibility, to those urges, to those feelings. So you can't control the urge to sneeze, but what you can control is that you can cover your mouth with a handkerchief to make sure you don't get other people sick. Same goes with our emotions, with our feelings. You can't control loneliness, uncertainty, fatigue, whatever it might be. You can't control those things. What you can control is how you respond to those sensations. Do you respond in a healthful way or in a harmful way?
It reminds me of substance abuse and just in general, like addiction, right? And it even reminds me of AA, right? People go to Alcoholic Anonymous, and the first step and the first thing you do is you say, hi, I am so and I'm an alcoholic. It's like the admission, and the
Yeah.
awareness helps you to solve the issue. So I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, not to nitpick too much
Yeah.
here, but I
Yeah.
actually don't like that model.
Interesting. Interesting.
Well,
How
yes.
come?
Well, because AA is the most widely known treatment for addiction.
Okay.
The 12-step program turns out to be not that effective. It's only about a
Interesting.
12% recovery rate.
Wow.
And part of the problem is that it relies upon treating behaviors as uh, as a as a noun, right? When you say, "My name is Nir and I am an addict,"
Got it. It's a
you are
label.
casting, it's a label.
Right. A
It's a
stigma.
label.
Right.
And people will conform to their
Interesting.
self-perception. So sometime, and there's a lot of research on this. This comes from the psychology of religion. And we can use self-identity to help us create the right types of behaviors in our life. We can also use it to create the wrong types of behaviors, things that don't serve us, things that hurt us. And there's many examples of this, right? If you believe, let me give you a great example. There's one example in the book. I talk about this concept of ego depletion. There was a pretty good body of research around this idea that willpower is a limited resource, and many people believe this, that you run out of willpower. I would come home from work and I would say to myself, oh, I've had such a tough day. I'm so spent. I've got nothing left. I don't have any more willpower. Give me that pint of Ben and Jerry's. I'm going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, right? How we say this kind of stuff to ourselves all the time, that we're spent, that we've got nothing left. And a few years ago, there was actually some research done out of Florida State University that found that this concept is called ego depletion, that we run out of willpower like we would run out of gas in a gas tank. Well, what happens in the social sciences frequently, it's been happening a lot more over the past few years, that when a study smells a little fishy, we run the study again. We see if we can replicate the results. And it turns out that these magical properties around willpower, that we are depleted, that we have no willpower left, that it's like gas in a gas tank, is simply not true. The studies would not replicate. The effect doesn't exist, except in one group of people.
Mm-hmm.
There are one group of people who do actually experience ego depletion. They really do run out of gas, of willpower, like someone would run out of gas in a gas tank. And those people, and only those people, are people who believe that willpower is a limited resource. So this is a wonderful example of how these self-limiting beliefs can have such an impact on our daily lives. And so this myth that we're addicted to technology, right, that it's hijacking our brains, it is rubbish. Now, some people do have the pathology of addiction. 1 to 5% of the population does have the pathology of addiction, but we don't all have this. What we have is not an addiction, it's a distraction, right? But of course, when we call it what it really is, through the correct nomenclature, that it's a behavior, not a noun, not a personality, not a moniker.
Right.
Well, now that's not so much fun,
right?
Because now I have no one to blame,
Totally.
right? When there's an addiction,
Totally.
there's a pusher, there's a dealer, there's those big bad tech companies doing it to me. But when it's a distraction, oh no, now I have to do something about it. That's no fun. But of course, that's the truth.
I love that, really. As a physician, I love that, because I do see a lot of blame. Some patients that you see, and again, love patients, but, a lot of blame, a lot of blame for whether it's weight gain or it's bad blood sugars. A lot of times people have difficulty looking within and seeing what, it's my genetics, and genetics are very important. But I think we can't change genetics. So okay, we're going to blame genetics and sort of spend 5 minutes right? But let's do something about it.
You know this better than anyone, right? There are some conditions, a thyroid disorder. Okay. That might lead to weight loss, or that does have a physiological effect.
Yes.
But it's not always a physiological effect, right? And so the same goes with addiction. Some people, there tends to be a very high comorbidity with obsessive compulsive disorder and addictions.
Right.
Some people really do have the disorder of an addiction. But this term addiction, we use it everywhere today. My wife got a box of shoes from DSW, DSW, the shoe maker.
Course.
So the shoe store, it says, this box of shoes says danger, addictive contents inside. Like everything is addictive these days, right?
But that's a marketing thing. A marketing thing.
Exactly. Well, everything is. We think everything somehow is addictive.
Totally.
If you like to watch sports a lot, you're addicted to sports.
Right.
If you like to watch the news a lot, you're a news junkie.
Totally.
Everything is addictive, because we like this language of sloughing off responsibility, because that means, well, what am I going to do about it? It's the big bad companies doing it to me. And what I want to do is wake people up and realize, look, these monikers, these labels that we put on ourselves, they don't necessarily serve us. Now, sometimes they can. Let me give an example of where you can use an identity to serve you. We know that people who have certain types of identities can actually use those identities to stay on the right track that they want for their lives. I'm not making a judgment call on how to live your life. What I want to do is to help you live whatever life you want for yourself. Right. And what we know is that people who call themselves, for example, a vegetarian, someone who calls themselves a vegetarian, they don't wake up in the morning and say, should I have some bacon for breakfast or not? No, that's not what they do, because it's not who they are. They use that identity, they use their moniker to help them do what they want to do, or to make sure they steer clear of what they don't want to do. Same goes for religions, right? When someone's a devout Muslim, they don't say, should I have that beer or not? No, devout Muslims don't drink alcohol, right? An observant Jew doesn't have pork. It's just part of who they are. They don't expend any willpower to make those type of decisions. And this is a defining trait of people who are indistractable. They don't need a lot of self-control. They don't expend a lot of willpower. They just have a system. They have, part of it is an identity. And so this is where the title of the book comes from, Indistractable. Indistractable sounds like indestructible,
Right.
right? This is the superpower. This is the skill of the century. And so we can use that moniker, we can use that identity to help us do what we want to do. The reason I came up with this, so I wanted to look at when we had other struggles as a society around these bad behaviors. And so I looked at the last time that we conquered something like this, which is smoking, right? That, in the United States, we went from over 40% of the US population to today it's 14% and dropping. And part of what did that was that people had a strong identity around smoker or non-smoker. I remember my mom, when I grew up in the 80s, in our living room, we had ashtrays, right? But my parents didn't smoke. And yet we had
Wow.
ashtrays in our house. You probably remember this, right? Like
Yeah, of course.
everybody had ashtrays in their living room. People had ashtray collections, whether they
Yeah.
smoked or not. Because when people came over to each other's houses, they just expected to have the right to light up a cigarette in your living room. Can you imagine if someone came to your house and just lit up a cigarette in your living room? That would be incredibly rude, right?
Right.
What happened? What changed? There's never been a law that says you can't smoke in someone's private residence. What changed was one day, people like my mother said, enough of this. She threw away the ashtrays. And when one of her friends came over, lit a cigarette, and was looking for an ashtray, she said, oh, I'm sorry. We are non-smokers. If you would like to smoke, please be so kind as to go outside. And of course, this woman's reaction, oh my gosh, you're going to tell me to go outside to smoke a cigarette? How dare
Yeah.
you? How rude.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it takes. It takes people like my mother to stand
Wow.
up and have this new identity
Yeah.
to spread what we call social antibodies. When
Wow.
we find that there's an unhealthy behavior in society, we need people to inoculate our behaviors by calling others out and by changing
Wow.
society
Wow.
at large. And so that's what this means to become indistractable, being the kind of person who says, look, yeah, I'm going to do some things that are slightly odd, right? I'm not going to answer every text message every 30 seconds. You know why? Because I want to control my time and my attention, not to let my time and my attention be controlled by others. I am indistractable. It's who I am.
That so resonates on many levels. First of all, because we are in a COVID time, right? In the middle of the pandemic. And there were many of us who stood up and said, let's socially distance, even when we weren't. And
Mm,
it took those people to actually get society to stop. It's the change makers. It
yeah.
wasn't everyone. Even within physicians, there were physicians that were saying, like, this is nothing, this is like the flu. And they've since, many of them came around and said, we apologize, it was wrong. So that's
Yeah.
A. But B, in my town also, I am always thinking, as not only a physician, but like a parent, I'm always thinking that it's my responsibility to like start discussions on just how scary cell phones can be. And again, it
Mm,
seems like I'm blaming the cell phone, but I'm
mhm.
not. I'm saying getting parents together and saying we can make things different as
Right.
parents of children with, right? With
Absolutely.
distractible phones.
Totally. So you don't have to think that technology is a boogeyman in order to limit the use of your technology and your kids' use of technology. That I think that's very healthy. What we don't want to do is to send these mixed messages to our kids of, tech, no, being tech literate is imperative for your future, which it is, right? The jobs of the future, the high-paying jobs of all jobs of the future will require tech literacy, but don't use technology because it's melting your brain. Like
Totally.
that's an
It's a
incoherent message.
disconnect.
It's really hypocritical. I see this all the time of parents who say, stop playing Fortnite to their kids. Meanwhile, they're checking Facebook and email on their phones. Right?
Totally.
I
Totally.
see that
It's
all the time.
hypocritical.
It's totally, and children are born, they have these amazing hypocrisy detection devices that they're born with. And so kids are
Totally.
constantly looking for how we are being hypocrites. And
Yeah.
they love to call us out on when we mess up. And so if we want to raise indistractable kids, we have to be indistractable ourselves. And so the idea here isn't to vilify these tools. They're wonderful tools. It's about asking this critical question of, is this tool serving me or am I serving it? And that goes for any form of media, any potential distraction. Is the news a good thing? Of course it is, but not if it's running your life.
Right.
Is social media a good thing? Yes, but not if you're on it instead of doing something you plan to do.
Mm.
Anything could be a potential distraction. This is a really important dichotomy I think we should talk about for a quick second to understand what is distraction. We keep using this term. What does it actually mean? So in order to understand what distraction is, you have to understand what distraction is not. So the
Love
opposite
it.
of distraction is not focus. Okay, this is an important distinction. The opposite of distraction is not focus. The opposite of distraction is traction.
Right.
So both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6-letter word, A-C-T-I-O-N, that spells action. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you want to do. It helps you live out your values, to be the kind of person you want to be. That's traction. The opposite of traction is distraction. Any action that pulls you away from what you plan to do, anything that pulls you away from your values and being the kind of person you want to be. So this is really important because anything can be distraction and anything can be traction.
Yeah.
The difference is one word, and that word is intent. If you planned to do a particular thing, go on Facebook, watch a Netflix show, read the news, whatever it is you want to do, great, as long as you do it on your schedule, not somebody else's. So we don't want to vilify the technology, it's about using it with intent for all sorts of distractions.